Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. The Indian diaspora comprises over 18 million persons of Indian origin and 13 million non-resident Indians, making it the largest overseas community globally. The profile and geographical distribution of the Indian diaspora presents a great opportunity to promote the country's soft power and cultural diplomacy abroad. Now, this is the recommendation of a parliamentary panel to the government, suggesting that the potential of the diaspora community should be harnessed to serve as an effective tool in furthering India's interest and influence globally. In its report presented in Parliament in August last year, the committee said there is need to prepare a clear and comprehensive policy framework to engage more proactively with the Indians living abroad. The government has now filed its action taken notes on the recommendations made in the Standing Committee report titled Welfare of Indian Diaspora, Policies and Schemes. So of the 55 recommendations that were made, the government has accepted 43. There are 8 recommendations on which the committee has asserted reiteration. We'll discuss these in detail in Perspective today with eminent experts who are joining us on the program. Let me begin by introducing them to you. I'm pleased to have with me in the studio Mr. N.K. Premchandran, Member, Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs, Mr. Virendra Gupta, former Ambassador and President, Antarrashtriya Sahyog Parishad. Thank you to both my guests for joining me in the studio, and joining me virtually are 4 more guests. Let me also introduce them to you. Mr. Khande Rao Khan, he is Director, Foundation for India and Indian Diaspora Studies, USA, and he's also the President of the Global Indian Technology Professionals Association. We also have with us Ms. Sheba Nandkiolier, President, IAA Australia, Mr. Sanjeev Mehta, Professor of Economics, Royal Thimphu College, Bhutan, and Dr. Archana Sharma, she is Senior Staff Scientist, CERN Laboratory, Geneva, Switzerland. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today. Mr. Premchandran, to you first. What has been the main recommendation of the Standing Committee on External Affairs as far as the welfare of Indian diaspora is concerned?
See, the Standing Committee had a very detailed, threadbare discussion about the welfare of the Indian diaspora in foreign countries. And the focus of our recommendation is that any welfare to be done or to be provided to the Indian diaspora, that definitely we should have a database about the Indian diaspora in each countries, in the respective countries.
Right.
But unfortunately, it is finding it very difficult whenever, say, crisis comes. We have seen in the case of Ukraine, Gulf War, and so many instances by which we are not able to locate the people. We don't have a actual statistics regarding the diaspora. That is the main issue which is concerning the Indian diaspora. That was the apprehension which the committee has made. So one of the major recommendations which we have submitted to the government is some institutional mechanism has to be there in place so as to have the registration of Indian diaspora, especially those who are working abroad. They should have some accessibility to the our embassy, because we are all describing it as an embassy is a home away from home. If it is a home away from home, definitely who are living in the home, that statistics, their details, and nowadays we are having this IT sector, IT development. In such a situation, very easy to have this access or easy to have all these data compiled so that immediate action can be taken whenever a crisis comes, whenever an issue comes. That is the first major recommendation which we have made to the government.
Fair enough. So, Ambassador, in times of distress, whether the NRIs or the PIOs will want some kind of help from the country of origin. So, what is the biggest challenge when it comes to maintaining the database that the Ministry of External Affairs faces?
Well, I think broadly I agree with the Honourable Member of Parliament. The thrust of the report is essentially to convey the parliamentary view, Parliament's view, that it attaches a great degree of importance on linkages with the diaspora, and that the diaspora has a certain reasonable expectation to seek help from the government or to get help from the government of India. Now, how do you deliver that help? That becomes a very difficult thing because, as he rightly said, as the committee in fact repeatedly points out, that you are not able to get a proper database because people don't register. Normal inclination is not to register unless there is a problem. And the problem comes a begging, without any warning. When the problem is there, then you are left high and dry. So I think the committee is very right in reiterating its recommendation that an institutional mechanism, and ministry has to find a way of doing it. I guess that it only applies to Indian citizens abroad. You know, when you make a distinction between PIOs and NRIs, you obviously don't expect PIOs to register. Although PIOs also would, in some times of distress and difficulty, will expect certain support and help from the government of India. But there are issues of sensitivities which have to be borne in mind, that we are dealing with people who are foreign nationals, but they are of Indian origin. So what we connect with them in cultural and emotional terms. But just to add one more point, is that I'm very happy that Parliamentary Committee has reiterated its recommendations, not letting off the ministry off the hook. Ministry, wherever ministry has given wishy-washy replies, committee has taken it to task.
That's right, and that's what the ministry says, and this is a point of reiteration.
So I'm very happy that ministry has taken this, committee has taken this view and reiterated that it attaches a high degree of importance. And I think that message has gone loud and clear.
So for now, the procedure is voluntary. Is there a mechanism that in this age of technology, we can have something like a compulsory online registration?
Well, it's been talked about. You see, the help is really needed by certain category of people. You don't expect people who've gone as expatriates in America and elsewhere. No. They are not, although they will also be covered. But essentially, there are 2 or 3 categories of people.
Perhaps a more proactive engagement with the diaspora will help.
The workers in the Gulf countries and the Indian students who go abroad. And I think we have to have separate mechanisms for these 2 things. When workers are migrating out of India, at the Indian immigration checkpoints, some database can be compiled. And in the electronic age, everything can be compiled from there, because everybody who goes out goes through an immigration checkpoint. And his database can be transferred to the ministry. So I think it is not like, he doesn't have to go out to register, but the information would be available and it can be given out to the... So there may be systems of doing it like this. Even for the students, it can be done like this.
So let's hear it from the members of the Indian diaspora who in different countries hold positions of influence, important positions in different countries across the globe. So Ms. Sheba, let me come to you first. In terms of, the Indian government engaging more proactively with the Indian diaspora, so that currently the procedure and the mechanism, which is voluntary, is something that will interest members of the Indian community to actually come register with the Indian government and also engage, share with them the kind of work they do, contribute in their own way to their country of origin. What do you think should be the way ahead?
Thank you so much. For me, I think that there has been a definite shift in the way the government of India is approaching their relationship with the diaspora members now. I have seen this shift happening over the past 15, 20 years. And more recently, there is a lot more interaction where the government is concerned. They are keeping in touch with the diaspora members. There are programs which are being rolled out. The High Commission and the consulates overseas, at least in Australia, I know are very active. In fact, super active right now, reaching out, having constant programs. So I can see a shift in the dial in terms of the way the government is actually interacting with the diaspora. But I guess something from my perspective would be that, and being in the digital marketing space, we have IT companies in India, and we really need to harness them to, find a way in which seamlessly this information should be collected at the point of exit when it's happening in India. And I think it's not hard. It's quite easy in today's data analytics and robotics age. If we're not able to do that, and especially in India, then who else is going to do it? So that would be my first perspective shared.
Okay, Dr. Sharma, your perspective on how we can improve this engagement with members of the Indian community, especially at a time when, we are seeing rapid economic growth, there is a strong push for economic reforms, and we need our Indian diaspora support more than ever.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tina, for having me here. I think that the diaspora themselves are seen as little ambassadors of India, yielding soft power to the country of their adoption, I would say. And we are 32 million, and this is 4 times the Swiss population. Imagine that. So, the Swiss population, if we imagine a country which is a very, let's say, developed country, we take half of them as the power driving the country. So, imagine 32 million of us Indians or Indian origin people outside are a force to reckon with. So, how do we pick this up and contribute to the nation's development? We put ourselves in line with the national priorities. We want to draft strategies and action plans and align projects where we leverage this strength of the diaspora. So, the diaspora will be running to help, and this bridge needs to be created. And I think that the policies that are being drafted right now are extremely important. Also, fully agree with Sheba that the Indian missions and the embassies are really hyperactive these days, and there are programs every other day in Geneva as well, where India is really standing out there to be showing ourselves to the world. So engagement, I think, is extremely important to leverage the enhanced capabilities, I would say, of people who are fighting it out in the global arena.
You're right. It's the diaspora engagement efforts that have made India the country with the highest foreign inward remittances, which was the highest in the world in the financial year 21-22. Mr. Khan, but the importance here is about the need to have a clear and comprehensive policy when it comes to engaging with the Indian diaspora. Do you think that is somewhere we need to work further on? The ministry does engage with members of the Indian diaspora, and it's become more evident in recent years. But the fact that you don't have a policy which becomes the guiding principle.
Yeah, I think I echo what earlier panelists said about the engagement from the embassies and mission of India's. It's very strong. It's very high. Like if you look at it, the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, it's almost like a 90,000 or 88,000 different events happened. Pravasi Bharatiya Day, there was so much proactive engagement to get the leaders and the people from all over the world, but definitely I know from the United States. But when it comes to the actual participation at the broader level, it's a huge, as 32 million, and United States almost like a 4 million, probably 1/3 of the could be the Indian citizens. And in that, the segments are also diversified. So I think one technique would not suitable for everything. So definitely we see that there are a lot of online engagements and platforms created with it, whether it's a Madad, whether it's a Rishta, whether it's a ongoing progress on GISP. But by and large, except Madad, what I see is that the participation is low. And you can see the success of Madad versus others is that if there is a need, people would come. If there is not a need and the system is volunteers, then people would not come. There is no motivation. So we need to find out what could motivate people to come actually to the portal and register. And that reason needs to be given for the segment, and also innovative techniques needs to be used. For example, when outbound immigrants from India, there are tech professionals and non-tech professionals. For tech professionals, it could be mostly nowadays it's either could be outsourcing companies or it could be the students. In this, it can whether this consulting companies, etc. They can share the data, only the locations and the details on ongoing basis, or the students are directly partnering with the universities to get the updates. So it will be symbiotic between the government and the universities to share the data, and that would also keep it updated. When it comes to the Girmitias or Middle East countries where the large number of working population is there, and that's where the major need is, because they are not that much digitally educated.
Right.
So how do you empower them? So some incentives like there is something that the Bima or insurance was there, but I don't know how much is the actual utilization and making sure that they are getting benefited. or some other schemes where they are getting benefited and they get motivated to be part of that system. So combination of the help plus the technology needs to be there to make sure that we have a solution which is a caters to the audience and not just a technology platform making it available and hoping that they will come and then be available. But it's very impressive to see that government has taken so many steps and really thinking hard and engaging. And being in USA, I definitely see that the confidence on external ministry and the government has gone so high that there is a always not just in the United States but everywhere, that whenever Indian, whether citizen or not, is in distress, government of India is there to help. And that is something that is a remarkable development I can see over the years.
Okay,
At least
Dr.
in
Mehta,
last,
so in countries with a significant, with sizable presence of the Indian diaspora, we're seeing a lot of engagement efforts. What about the smaller countries where there are very few Indians living, and how are we addressing their grievances?
You're muted.
Please unmute yourself, Dr. Mehta.
Sorry for that. So one of the major issues is the database itself. And it's easier to maintain the database for the people who are working in organized formal sector.
Right.
A larger part of the Indian who are working as the construction industry. And they are not enrolled with the embassies. Only because probably they are not aware of these systems. And secondly, they don't feel it, basically at ease to go to the embassy and get enrolled. So I don't know what could be the mechanism through which it can be done. So basically the embassies have to play a little more proactive role to reach out to them and get them enrolled. They have been reaching out to this people, but largely to the formal sector, not to the informal sector. So I think this is one important element. The second thing which needs to be done is the lack of awareness. Even I was not aware of what Government of India has policies for diasporas, Indian living abroad. I read through this document that was sent to by Sansad TV. Mm-hmm. So even at my level, I'm ignorant about what Government of India does. Many people are not aware what are the policies that helps the diaspora. The Indian government provides support to the diaspora. So there's a need for creating awareness. And for that, it could be system where the one-day conference or workshop can be organized by the embassies and they can reach out and share the information with the diaspora in their countries.
Ambassador, that's an important takeaway. The fact that the government is actually doing a lot. There are multiple programs that I also went through, but they've not received the kind of response we would expect given the high number of members of the Indian diaspora. What can we do to make the people who are living abroad aware of these programs and who to approach when they are in distress?
Well, there are different things. And I think as all the panelists have pointed out, government has begun to do a lot more in terms of engaging and in terms of support for the diaspora. But in my opinion, it is not enough. And I think this is to be seen as a work in progress. And with continuing pressure from the Parliament, I hope this can translate into more tangible results. So we can't do a broad brush for everything. I mean, we have to look at different segments. For the students who are going, there are some specific cases like Ukraine and China. The students who've gone there, and I think the committee has made specific recommendations about how their cases can be dealt with, and I think it's very legitimate recommendations, and the government must act on it. At a generic level, there has to be better database. A lot of students, Indian students going abroad, get duped by fake universities, by fraudulent institutions. And I think if there were to be a comprehensive database about what kind of educational facilities exist overseas, then I think the students will benefit in broad terms, and there has to be a registration process. Now, you can advise all the students who are going abroad. We can do it at the exit point. Our embassies can be more proactive, and I think by and by we will get there, as the students also see that in case of difficulty they had to seek the assistance, and
So,
I think they would be.
The intent is there because clearly, given the engagement efforts, given the projects that are currently underway, the question is when we work towards making the Indian missions home away from home, what are the challenges that we are facing? Are we short on manpower? Are we short on funds? What is it that we are looking at so that our situation can
there are
improve?
difficulties in terms of, I think it's been pointed out, the absence of a comprehensive database. And this is not something that can be achieved overnight because you can't issue an edict. We are not that kind of a nation where we, order around our immigrants. So we can only advise them, we can only encourage them. And I think my sense is that by and by, we will get there, but it'll take time. And we have to show proactive interest at all levels. There has to be greater awareness through the media, through the social media platforms. Our embassies have to be, it's been pointed out. And I've seen the working of the missions. In fact, when I joined the government of India in '77, at that time, I was told specifically by one of my ambassadors that, engagement with the diaspora has to be at the bottom of your priorities. And that was how it was. By the time I left the diplomatic service, I had begun to keep, as an ambassador, I had begun to keep engagement with the diaspora at the top of my priorities.
And of course, now we are seeing with the dignitaries who are going abroad, visiting the diaspora, meeting them has become the top priority today.
Yes, but I still feel that there is a lot of rhetoric, there is a lot of grandstanding, but you have to go beyond that. And Government of India, in very broad terms, has to do much more than what it's been doing. And eventually it comes down to spending more money, which is not happening. The Government of India has to spend more money. And I can go into specific programs and how those specific programs can be expanded to benefit our different segments of the population. We can come back to it later.
In fact, in another report, the parliamentary panel has also suggested that their budget should be increased, but that's for another time. Mr. Prem Chandra, coming back to this report and the recommendations that have been made, you've made specific suggestions on rehabilitation of workers, particularly those who lost their jobs during COVID outbreak in the Gulf countries, and the medical students who were to come back home because of COVID outbreak in China. What has been the response that you got from the government?
Regarding the rehabilitation, the recommendation which we have submitted, the response of the government is not satisfactory. See, the main point which we have discussed in the first part of our debate in the discussion, that is to have a database. It is very easy because even at the immigration point, the checkpoint, definitely it can be very easily, it could be done. Even now, I still remember that especially those labor who are going out, especially in the Middle East countries, and there was an amount which was deposited at the time, but still it is unaware. Even the government is also not aware of the fact that the total amount collected and it is pending, nothing is being spelled out. Even in repeated questions in the parliament, it is not clear-cut answer has not been provided. This is the way by which this diaspora is being dealt with. I fully agree with him. That is more caution has to be taken to see that the welfare of the diaspora is being done. Why? Because they are also part and parcel of our Indian economy, especially from the Gulf countries. I know very well, after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, you see more than 6 lakh people have come back. Permanently, they have come back from the Gulf countries. See, they have to be rehabilitated. How it is? So far, there is no rehabilitation scheme. There is no welfare measures. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, so many people have died. And we couldn't do anything. Yes, transportation of mortal remains and all these things. Yes, that's all done by the NGOs or by the welfare organizations of, I know, so many organizations have done wonderful service than the government, than the embassy.
COVID has been a very difficult time, Ambassador, but going out to help and particularly have a rehabilitation scheme for those who lost their jobs and they came back home. What about those who lost their jobs within the country? Can we have some kind of a scheme which facilitates the members of the Indian diaspora and not those who are living within the country? Is it?
No, you have a very valid point. Of course, government has to be concerned. And this has been the criticism that many migrant workers within India suffered unduly during the COVID time. I mean, there is a challenge before the government. But here we are talking about our diaspora and the migrant workers who come from overseas. And as the honourable member mentions, and our parliamentary committee's report also mentions, that there are a lot of people, there's a very large number of people who have been rendered jobless and they have had to return. Now, one view could be that, look, you went abroad, you didn't ask us as to, for going abroad. When you come back, there are no opportunities. Now you fend for yourself. And I think that is a very cruel approach. Not an unreasonable.
Yes. Without interruption, the government cannot say that without their permission, because
Cannot.
it is absolutely with the permission of the government. They have
So the government has to make effort to ensure that there is some reasonable dispensation provided to them for their rehabilitation.
But within
retraining
limitations, they have to be concerned about also.
And I don't think that is happening. So the government has to pay greater attention to, various pinpointed measures which have been recommendations which have been made. And I think I'm very glad that very detailed recommendations have been made by the Parliament.
Perspective today, we are discussing the Standing Committee's report on the welfare of the Indian diaspora, the need for policies and schemes that the ministry must bring about. So before we slipped into the break, we were talking about how there is a need for a database on the Indians living abroad and how there needs to be also a comprehensive policy in terms of our engagement with members of the Indian diaspora. A quick review of the recommendations that the Standing Committee on External Affairs made to Parliament. The Department-related Standing Committee on External Affairs presented its report on the action taken by the government on its recommendations. The government accepted 43 recommendations, as I told you earlier, that were made by the panel. Now, the panel had submitted its report on the welfare of Indian diaspora policies and schemes in August last year. The 15th report of the committee had asked the government to effectively engage with the Indian diaspora of over 18 million persons of Indian origin and 13 million NRIs. Noting that the Indian diaspora is one of the largest overseas communities globally, the committee said the government must create an authentic database on the diaspora. This, it said, will help to effectively implement welfare schemes for those living abroad. In its action taken report, the government said that missions and posts have been directed to make rigorous efforts to reach out to the diaspora. But at the same time, it also observed that registration is voluntary and 100% diaspora might not be registered with the mission or post. Now, commenting on the action taken report by the government, the parliamentary panel expressed its displeasure over the government not having an authentic database of the Indian diaspora. It said that Indian missions abroad should play a more proactive role in developing closer contact with the community. Also, the panel criticized the government on the lack of a clear-cut policy on engaging with the Indian diaspora, despite its important role in the socio-economic development of their home country. So we'll continue talking to our guests, members of the Indian diaspora who are joining us virtually, on what problems they face when it comes to engaging with the government, especially on the aspect of grievance redressal. Ms. Shiba, coming back to you, there are, the Indian diaspora today is the largest globally. What we see in terms of numbers, in terms of remittances that we are getting is the highest in the world. It's important for us to have a mechanism in place, a one-stop destination wherein all their grievances can be redressed. So the committee suggests that right now we have multiple portals for grievance redressal. Is there, expectation from the community also to have at least just one place wherein all their problems can be solved? And is there where we are lacking?
Thank you, Tina. I think that is such an excellent question. And a lot of us members who live overseas, many of us have faced issues where not necessarily deep grievances, where we need to address it in our country of origin, which is India. And I think one of the things that will really help is a one-stop shop where, there's this just one portal, you go across, you register your grievance or your complaint or whatever you want to sort your issues, and let that be the one portal where everything gets resolved. Now, at the moment, I know that a lot of people, which includes even some of my family members, sometimes they run around to too many departments, and there's a lot of runaround which happens in India. And it's not a good look, especially because these diaspora members are ambassadors. They are really trying to show the ease of doing business in India, how easy it has become to operate in India. Bureaucracy is gone. But when you have, personal experiences of this kind, it definitely does affect the, overall experience of what should be happening. So I would recommend definitely a one-stop shop, one portal where we go in, and then I think Ministry of External Affairs and the other departments, whoever are concerned, can kind of work it out as to what's the best way to resolve the issue. But I think from our perspective, just one-stop shop for sure.
Okay, Mr. Khanderao Khan, your perspective on the aspect of ease of doing business. There have been important steps that have been undertaken in recent years, but what more can be done? When we say the procedure, the mechanism has to be seamless, and the Indians who want to, give back to their country of origin do not face the kind of hassles. So what really needs to be done to make the procedure more seamless, more smooth?
Yeah, thank you. I think the micro level, individual level, lot of progress has been made when it comes to the government related issues. Like say, particularly, let's say, first level of issue I can call related to MEA that can handle visas, passport, OCIs, and etc. type of thing. That's a lot of is there. However, at the macro level, the bigger issues. For example, let's say that NRI has a property dispute in India. It will be impossible. You will be compelled to just sell it somehow, get rid of it, or just ignore, because cannot if you get into the legal troubles, it will be like years even for the sitting in India. It's difficult. So now when NRI's remittances are high, they are contributing back. Whether there can be a process, expedited processes for those type of dealings. That's one. Then there are also issues related to the safety of their relatives, etc. That comes, particularly the parents taking care of that. That could be second part of it. Keeping that aside, when contributing back, particularly in the startup, I'm from the Silicon Valley. Startups doing the businesses, opening the startups are very easy. Great progress has been done. But when it comes to, say, merger and acquisitions, those rules are very difficult. Like say how you take the stock investment across the years and how do you tax it and etc. So there are certain issues when you look at from the bigger events, in particular, whether it's a personal life or the business lives, how do end-to-end tie together and how we can make it sure. So those are the processes which would require not just the some kind of portal, but procedural changes in the different departments to end-to-end scenario. Think that in a business process called as a automation, but end-to-end workflows, making sure that that happens. I want to also raise one more issue related to the OCI children of expatriate. Those are the one who went out of the country, right. But they return, they are Indian citizen, but children are not Indian citizen. They are always treated as a second class. Just give an example, in case of the COVID, Indian government really worked hard to get the NRI children back with the special planes and all that thing. But the OCI children, who are the children of the actual Indian citizens, had lot of troubles. And not just that, but many issues related to OCI children of the expatriate is also an issue. So you have to take broader cases and make sure that they're end-to-end handle, not at the individual level grievances. So individual level grievances, yes, there's a great degree of progress is there, but we need to make sure that macro level life events or the processes are actually worked out both framework level changes and also informational on the website or etc. and assistance around that.
That's right. Dr. Mehta, the fact is the government does recognize the importance of the Indian diaspora and especially their contribution as we move towards making our country a new India. But the need now is to strategically capitalize on the growing size, the growing influence of the Indian diaspora. So from your experience, apart from the recommendations that the parliamentary panel has made, what are the areas that we really need to work upon?
Interestingly, I would definitely say that Government of India has, in recent years, has done a lot. People are much more confident of visiting in embassies and getting help from them. And But there are multiple things that requires. One, basically, when the diaspora returns, I could talk about the experience of people who have stayed outside India for a long time and returned back to India. They are hardly aware of the local rules and regulations of their own cities. And they have very difficult time to manage things there. If the local government, actually at the district level, if they have basically a kind of window for Indian diaspora coming from outside and provide them all one-stop shop, basically information for about things and facilitate things for them, I think would go a long way for facilitating and helping the Indian diaspora when they return back. The second thing, and there are multiple actually, the local rules and regulations are so diverse and so complicated that it would be very difficult for them to comprehend from one window, from multiple windows. The second thing is I recently came to know that NRI cannot buy agricultural property in India. I was really surprised to know that. What is this rule? So I think these are the rules and regulations which require some consideration. It has to actually coordinate with the Home Ministry and the governments of different states, because state governments have their own rules and regulations. They might not have uniformity in their approach. So what the central government should do is to create a coordinated approach in which there's some uniformity in the state rules as far as these things are concerned.
Okay, on these local rules, I'm reminded of the special focus that the ministry gave at the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas this year. There was a tagline, Surakshit Jao, Prashikshit Jao. So, Dr. Sharma, you were part of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. You were felicitated as well. What is the kind of response that this scheme of the ministry garnered on the aspect of Surakshit Jao, Prashikshit Jao? And another question that, I want to ask you is, the panel talks about a one-stop center overseas to help distressed NRI women. Now, how important is this going to be if this is incorporated, especially for the women Indians who are living abroad?
Thank you for this question. And I completely agree with my esteemed panel who have been making very good recommendations, and I relate to each one of them. This one-stop shop is an amazing idea, and I think it will also form a bridge from the home country to the different countries where we are. So me sitting in Switzerland, I can imagine that, that's my particular line of connectivity to my grievance, to my problem. The problem becomes when we do not know about things. We do not have this report, I'm sorry for my ignorance, but I did not know about this report. So there should be a mechanism by which the diaspora, once it is connected, obviously we are speaking about the database, so that, one email can be sent to all diaspora about updates that are happening in the country that are relevant for them. And I know that the embassies and the missions are working really hard on this to make this bridge between the diaspora and India. Now, I want to highlight also the role of Indian associations, and every literally city and country has many associations of India, Friends of India, and so on. And in Geneva, we have a huge association, especially, because our culture and traditions are so vibrant that we definitely celebrate Holi, Diwali, and, we do all those kind of celebrations. Everyone comes there. That's the point where you find people who will voluntarily register for, in the diaspora database. So I feel that the onus of reaching out to every person in the Indian diaspora would be to the Indian associations and the presidents of the associations and the executive councils of these associations. And I think that would really make a difference in terms of reaching out. As far as women are concerned, I think it is extremely important that they feel comfortable where they are. And I think by now, in the last 2-3 decades, from what we see, that women come out very prepared, at least in the world where I come from, which is in science, education, and engineering. So women come very prepared. However, that's not the only, let's say, strata of women who are coming. Many of them, they get married, or they are deserted, or they have other issues. And certainly, I feel that the missions and the embassies are doing a good job of being there for them and being a home away from home for them. So I feel that there are so many initiatives that are seeking out to the diaspora, but there is an effective need for cooperation, coordination, and a long-term vision. Because if the diaspora is taken into account when we plan development in India and draw up strategies and action plans which are for long term, I think that will bring and leverage the advantage of the diaspora's potential for the country. So yes, I think that there is a lot of potential out there with the diaspora, the willing diaspora, and we should not think that we have to do something for the diaspora. It's how can we imbibe the diaspora in the development of our country, in the country, and for the image of our country abroad.
Absolutely. So the strand of relationship has to be strengthened both sides if we want to have a resilient, robust bond with members of the Indian diaspora. Ms. Shiva, I'll take that question to you also. Your perspective on having one-stop centers, particularly for distressed women NRIs? How welcome a move is it?
Thank you, Tina. In fact, I'm glad you directed that question to me because I have to say the Australian government and the Indian government have been working very closely together on various issues. And now if this happens, a lot of these initiatives actually are quite successful. Now, one of which is we know that a lot of women who get married and come overseas and then they land up into a domestic violence situation. And because they are dependent on their partner's visa, they keep quiet because they feel that obviously they go and complain, they'll be deported. They lose the standing because they have no visa. It's a dependent visa.
Right.
So the Australian government very, very recently, I think as recent, maybe in the last couple of weeks, they decided that, these women have to be protected and they can come out and they can get out of the situation and they do not need to worry about their visa status. The Australian government will ensure that they get their visa to stay on here and it is not dependent on the husband or the partner's visa, despite the situation. So this, I think, is an amazing thing. And again, I have to be very frank. In Australia, I've seen both the governments work very, very closely together. Something else I want to share is the DPAT, which is Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. They have actually declared the Indian diaspora as a national asset. And there's a whole white paper which has come out, which is fantastic. They have set up something which is called Centre of Australia-India Relations and dedicated a huge budget, I have to say, to really see how you can work and maximize the asset that is the Indian diaspora in Australia to really build the relationship between the two countries. There's some amazing things happening, Tina, and I'm really, really very happy to be at this point of time in Australia to see how this relationship is panning out.
Heartening to note that, the diaspora in Australia has been declared as a national asset. We hope that similar mechanisms are also established in other countries. And that takes me to another aspect of the Standing Committee's report, that is about skilling of potential migrant workers, Mr. Premchandran. Post-COVID, employment security, better wages has become a huge challenge. So for thousands of Indian migrant workers who are going to countries, but in terms of job security, they don't have that kind of assurance. What is the recommendation that you've made? What has been the government's response on ensuring that when they go abroad for work, they are paid decently and their jobs are secure?
We can never say that the jobs in foreign countries, especially the Gulf countries, as far as the migrant labor is concerned, it is not at all secure. At any time they can come back because of the policy reasons of the government, the respective governments, and so many other reasons. So I think that all the time when we are discussing, even in the Pravasi Bharatiya Din celebrations also, if you see, there also we are discussing only about the elite class of this diaspora. The poor people, the labor class, and like the distressed women, you see, the distressed women mean the housemaids. How many housemaids are being cheated and they are being distressed like anything? So we have to give focus to those issues. Yes, definitely, all these sections have to be protected and addressed in a better way, but at the same time, this lower strata of the society who are migrant workers outside the country or migrating to foreign countries, but their conditions are very poor. That's why I'm saying that in my state, Kerala, in one of the country having very good number of these returnees, Gulf returnees and NRIs, I can very well say that more than 6 lakh people have come back. They don't have any job. They don't have any security. So the government, both, I am not blaming any government, both the government of India as well as the respective state government should come together to have a rehabilitation package in which both the center and the state should bear the responsibility. Such a rehabilitation scheme has to be formulated. It is quite unfortunate to see that even after decades, we are not in a position to have a clear-cut rehabilitation package for the returnees or for these distressed women and all these things. So that is why I'm saying even during the time of COVID-19 pandemic also, we couldn't give any financial assistance to the people. Yes, I do agree the government of India has done, to an extent they have done, but at the same time, this may happen at any time. The crisis may be due to war or due to pandemic or due to some other reasons or whatever it may be. So definitely we should have such a program, and it should be because they are the remittance, the foreign remittance. I can very well explain more than 1 lakh crores of rupees was the foreign remittance to a state like Kerala, a small state like Kerala. So the economy of Kerala state and it is depending on this Gulf money and this remittance from the foreign countries. In such a situation, more prominence should be given. Priority should be provided for the welfare of the diaspora. Means, in particular, this labor clause and the women, housemaid servants, and they should be protected and they should be rehabilitated when they lost everything. That is the point which I would like to make. I stressed this thing in the External Affairs Standing Committee, and I think that we have already recommended it. And the Pravasi Bharatiya Din also, this is my personal observation. This is whenever we see the Pravasi Bharatiya Din or global Lok Sabha and all these things, it is only addressing the issues of people of higher strata. The lower strata, people belonging to lower strata who are actually working in foreign countries. They have to, their issues, their problems have to be addressed in a better way than this, for which our missions and embassies have to give more priority to them. Unfortunately, it is not being done because I am also visiting so many countries. I can very well say this section of the people are being deprived of their welfare or their right to have all these things.
Okay, there is no doubt that, the diaspora engagement initiatives have to be strengthened further, Ambassador. But I'll take one last remark from you on the situation that we are in. It's an elaborate report that the panel has presented with recommendations for different sections of the diaspora. But the question here is about when we are witnessing this interesting journey of transformation, we seek to be a developed nation in the next 25 years, and the Indian diaspora is going to play a significant role in our economic growth. The challenge is how well do we channelize their resources, their talent, their potential?
I think it's a big challenge. There is intent on the part of the government. And I think what needs to be understood, the sense that I get, is that there is this generic term, diaspora, and that doesn't help.
Yes.
When you begin to devise policies and how to implement and how to get about, for instance, complaint redressal, you cannot do it with a broad brush. Let's take the case of women. There are women who are suffering domestic violence in developed countries. Now, Australia has made this mechanism, but I'm sure that in most of the developed countries, women who suffer domestic violence, even though they may be dependent visa status, but the laws of the countries where they are living provide them enough opportunities. Then, of course, you have women who get married to NRIs or people who are pretending as NRIs. They may be actually having another family already. They come here, get the money, go back, and you never hear from them. There are umpteen cases of that kind. Then, of course, the most pathetic situation is about the domestic women workers who are taken to Gulf countries and many other countries. And that actually borders on exploitation. And they are the most helpless. So I think we have to begin to put these problems in different segments, categorize them, and then I believe we would be able to find better solutions.
Fair enough.
We have
That-
students.
That explains that, we can't have a one-size-fit-all approach
Absolutely.
when we are talking about a diverse diaspora. But the fact is that there are problems that the committee has flagged. The government has accepted these recommendations. The need now is to have at least a guiding principle, especially in areas where we have in countries where we have significant diaspora presence, so that their role, their potential can be harnessed in India's economic growth. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Time allows me to take up only that much on this edition of Perspective. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. And to you viewers, thank you very much for your time as well. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Take good care of yourselves. Keep watching Sansad TV.